I'm Jim Parker of Broken Road Radio. Just a kind of a special note to begin with for those of you who may have heard this podcast live on Broken Road Radio several days ago. Just so you know, we lost the first half of it because somebody failed to press the record button. That person is still standing in the corner doing penance. So we're going to remake the beginning to bring it to the point where Pastor Robbie comes in and salvages the whole thing with some really important contextual information. Pastor Robbie Pruitt is an Anglican pastor with his church in Fairfax. Also, he's the executive director of Preserving Bible Times. Today, Robbie speaks for the defense in what began as a guest appearance by Jesus at that synagogue in Nazareth that somehow turned into more of a court trial. You'll find the event described in Luke 4. Jesus was the accused. Consider yourself sitting on the jury. The charge? Blasphemy. Not only for Jesus claiming to be the Messiah, but also for his daring to alter a sacred verse of the prophet Isaiah, who was a rock star to these folks in attendance. Well, at first they were amazed at the gracious words that came from his lips, so it says in Luke 4. The next moment they decided to stone him. What happened here? To set the stage for Pastor Robbie, we'll begin with a brief segment from a streaming video on Preserving Bible Times. It's entitled That Dust Up in Nazareth. Robbie will have more for you about that streaming video a bit later. Order in the court. Order. There are now 2 charges against the defendant. No, it was supposed to be a congenial reading from the sacred text by a local boy who was setting Galilee on fire with his teaching. But he infuriated his local synagogue crowd by giving them his interpretation of their favorite text from Isaiah, implying that they'd had it all wrong for generations, that God had always intended compassion and mercy for everyone, including Gentiles, whom they had fully intended to subjugate and enslave, setting the stage for Messiah. Next, he had the gall to imply that he was Messiah. Well, actually, it was pretty much a flat-out statement. Wait a sec, they said, isn't this Joseph's son? His audience had turned to judge, jury, and as we will find out momentarily, executioner. There is an old adage that you may have learned in Sunday school. The Old Testament is the New Testament concealed. The New Testament is the Old Testament revealed. On this day in Nazareth, Jesus, the Messiah, the veritable embodiment of the New Testament, demonstrated the essence of that. Having just obsoleted their paradigm of Old Testament retribution on the Gentiles and the subjugation of anyone not like them, Jesus now utterly confounded the prosecution's case by invoking their own law. These were people of the book. The law of Moses was their standard, though it had been selectively taught over the generations. Just where did God demonstrate compassion for those deplorable Gentiles? Well, Jesus was about to remind them. His legal precedent can be found in Deuteronomy chapter 19, verse 15. On the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses, a matter shall be confirmed. Jesus called 2 of the culture's most cherished prophets to the stand, Elijah and Elisha. Their stories are recorded in the book of Kings. During a severe famine, Elijah saved the son of the widow of Zarephath in Sidon, only about 30 miles north and east of Nazareth as the crow flies, Gentile country. She was not a Jew. Zarephath was a town under the jurisdiction of Sidon and was decidedly Phoenician in nature. Jesus said there were many widows in Israel in Elijah's time, but Elijah chose only this widow, and he healed her son. Elijah also kept them from starvation, by the way, performing a miracle with the little flour and oil that they had remaining. The second witness summoned was Elijah's successor, Elisha. Naaman was an arch-enemy of Israel, commander of the Syrian army, and he had leprosy. Elisha told him to bathe in the Jordan River 7 times and he would be cured. He did, and he was. Jesus pointed out there were many with leprosy in Israel, but only Naaman the Syrian was cleansed. Gentile. Both events were well known to observant Judaism, and certainly to those residents of Nazareth. Both events were undeniably examples of God's compassion and mercy on Gentiles. Case dismissed. Well, not so fast. Now, let's check the legal basis for Jesus' defense case just one more time. 2 or 3 witnesses to confirm the matter. Might there be even a third witness, proving God's compassion for the Gentiles? Note the location again of Zarephath. The Mediterranean coast was a veritable haven for Gentiles. Now, not that Jesus needed any help, but Pastor Robbie offers some contextual detail that supports the defense case nicely.
These are shipping ports on the Mediterranean, and they're Gentile, filled with Gentiles. It's interesting that here we see another woman who has a demon-possessed girl, a Syrophoenician woman that Jesus heals this demon-possessed daughter. So like Elijah heals the son who died, Jesus heals this Syrophoenician woman in the same area. And he heals her daughter, and it's a funny exchange. She says, heal my daughter, she's possessed. And Jesus says to her, should I throw the children's bread to the dogs? And she says, yes, Lord, but even the dogs gather up the crumbs under their master's table. And he says, I haven't seen such faith in all of Israel. So Jesus commends her for her faith, and we see a geographical remez back to the woman, the widow of Zarephath in the days of Elijah. So Jesus is the greater Elijah. And we know that Jesus also healed lepers throughout the land who were worse than Gentiles, worse than Romans. They were outcast of outcasts. You might recall the 10 lepers in Luke's gospel, where one comes back, and that's a Samaritan, this Gentile Samaritan, where the Jewish lepers go on to show themselves in the temple. But Jesus says, where are the 9? Weren't there 10 cleansed? And so you see that leprosy actually unites both Jew and Gentile. And Jesus heals all of them. So they have this thing in common that transcends their race. So now a Jewish leper is hanging out with a Samaritan leper and a Gentile leper. So you see this equalizing state of leprosy. So now Jesus cites this in the days of Elisha. He cites Naaman. In verse 27 of Luke chapter 4, it says, and there were many lepers in Israel in the time of Elisha, and none of them was cleansed but Naaman the Syrian. When they heard these things, all in the synagogue were filled with wrath. They were enraged. They were in a rage at this. And what is this? I agree with Doug Greenwald in chapter 3 of Encounters with Jesus, with our program in Dust Up in Nazareth, that it's this idea of how he's editing Isaiah 61. That's a part of their rage. The rest of it is the widow of Zarephath and Naaman the Syrian, a leper, being cleansed.
The irony of all this is here is Messiah correcting them.
Right.
They're looking for the Messiah, yet they take offense and decide to kill him.
Right. They're going to stone him. They're going to push him over the brow of the cliff. There's 2 ways you can stone a person. You can take the stones to the person, or you can take the person to the stones. Usually you do both. If you have a high place and you can push someone over a cliff, that is considered stoning them because you're taking the person to the stones. If the fall doesn't kill them when they dash their heads upon the rock, then you cast stones down upon them. And so Jesus is run out of town. A prophet is indeed without honor here, except for in his own hometown. He is not without honor, except for in his own hometown. In other words, he can get accolades anywhere he goes and preaches. But when you go to your own hometown with a hard message, well, this is what they do. They don't show him honor at all. they show him the door, and they're going to show him the cliff is the plan, and it's the Sabbath day. It's actually against the law to stone someone on the Sabbath day, yet they are so enraged that they're seeking to stone him.
And here's a note of geological context as well. There is a place on the Nazareth Ridge, about 1.5 miles from the location of the old Nazareth synagogue, known as Mount Precipice now in modern times, and it was the designated place for stoning. That's where they would have had to have taken Jesus to do it the standard way. And this is another theory as to why it didn't happen. It's about 1.5 miles from downtown Old Nazareth Village. Too many steps to walk on the Sabbath. So there's another rule they couldn't break. And so there were those that wanted to stone him and those that said, no, we can't do that. Except that part is surmised. I'm reading that into it, but it is a piece of contextual information that probably applies. That, and the Romans wouldn't have permitted them to kill him anyway.
Right. And another fun fact, it's from that precipice, it's from that brow of the cliff that you can see Mount Carmel, where Elijah called down fire from heaven, the prophets of Baal, and you can look south and see where Elisha raised the Shunammite's son. You can see the mountain of Tabor there, and here again, Jesus raises a dead person on the other side.
Which, by the way, is across the Kidron Valley, the site of Armageddon, where Jesus was raised. He had the view of that whole area growing up for his whole youthful life. So the connections of these people with the land and with Jesus are an integral part of the story.
Now, these are geographical remezes. So in other words, we can look at these places and what Jesus does there, or in the shadow of there, what he's preaching, what he's teaching, and he's invoking these prophets. And he is the greater Elijah. He is the greater Elisha. And he heals this woman, this Canaanite woman, heals her daughter. And again, he is living out this idea that salvation is for the Jews, but it's also for the Gentiles. It's always been for the Gentiles.
I have to correct myself. I said Kidron Valley. It's the Jezreel Valley.
The Jezreel Valley.
Kidron Valley is just east of Jerusalem. This is an east-west valley, and will be the site ultimately of, it's where the Megiddo tell is, where they've studied the geography and archaeology, but it's going to be a pivotal place in all of human history at some point.
Valley of Armageddon, some of the oldest, most ancient altars are there. And I've seen some of these altars. Solomon refortified this city. It's a pivotal city in the trade route from north to south there in the Jezreel Valley. And so Jesus grew up here, and he taught even in his own synagogue. He certainly offended people by the gospel, which is the good news of salvation for everyone, for the Jew and Gentile alike. You get echoes of what Paul said in Romans, "For I'm not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation for everyone who believes, to the Jew first and also to the Gentile." Salvation is for all people. Salvation are for Canaanite women, Syrophoenician women, widows, Romans, and Gentiles, and Samaritans. And Jesus is living this out as he heals all people.
That whole presentation, as we call it, the dust up in Nazareth. And it's very instructive, not only to Jesus' teaching methods, but the history of those people in that place and that time, and how it all wraps together so beautifully, so meaningfully is probably a better word. And again, the Dust Up in Nazareth is a streaming video you can purchase at Preserving Bible Times. Also, Doug's book, Encounters with Jesus, available as an ebook there. That's preservingbibletimes.org. Robbie, we thank you for what you bring us.
Joy, a privilege, and a pleasure to be with you. And I'll do you one better. If you sign up for our email newsletter, you get a link to the Dust Up in Nazareth for free.
That's
now on our website.
Do that on the website again, preservingbibletimes.org, upper right-hand corner. there is a click. You can sign up for the Between the Lines newsletter. It comes to you in your email each month, and it is free, but you'll look forward to it. So, and Robbie, well, both of you, we'll look forward to seeing you next time.